Կշարունակեմ անգլերենով. So the scope of toponymic studies is constantly expanding to include representatives from sociolinguistics, cultural geography, anthropology, history, urban studies, and other academic fields. But let us dwell a little on the semantic definition of toponymy. The landscape consists of space elements carrying no subjective meaning, and these space elements become places when we attach the meaning to them. As Claude Lévi-Strauss indicates, spaces become places when we name them. Toponyms are names for places which signify geographical elements within the landscape and mark the place identity. Toponymy, that is the study of place names, toponyms, has been studied from different perspectives. Recent studies draw attention to the relationship between toponymy and power. Others emphasize the importance of place names as a strategy of nation building and state construction, demonstrating how governmental authorities construct new regimes of toponymic inscription to present specific ideas of history and national narratives. In spite of the above-mentioned research, there has been little investigation on the relation between power and toponymy of the communist cities. Studies of the socialist city were rather inclined to focus on the formal and informative aspects of Soviet toponymy, and less attention was paid to the street district names as one of the major systems of implementation of the communist socialist ideology in the urban space. With the establishment of Bolshevik power in Armenia, a large-scale process of naming, renaming of place names began. To institutionalize the new regime, government used the urban landscape to represent socialist ideology and values to the citizens of Soviet Armenia. The renaming of place names became one of the main tools for the legitimization of the power and also for the process of state building and identity formation in Soviet Armenia. At the same time, parallel with this, another very interesting process of urban planning was going on. In the middle of 1920s, the Soviet authorities made a decision to build new settlements for the Armenian genocide survivors, Western Armenians, very close to the city of Yerevan. Later, these settlements became city districts. The process was interesting, first of all, because it took place within the policy of the program to ensure the repatriation of the Armenian genocide survivors. And moreover, the settlements or districts should carry the names of the settlements of Turkish Armenia, becoming duplicates of toponyms or displaced, in quotation marks, toponyms, such as Nor Arabkish, Nor Sebastian, Nor Kilikia, Nor Malatia, with the prefix Nor, which means new in Armenian. As Levon Abrahamian mentions, in this process of resettlement or displacement, the naming and renaming became somehow a creation or a recreation of the place. The urban plans of some of those settlements were developed by architect Alexander Tamanyan. In my research, I will try to present some fragments of the construction and naming policy of these new settlements or districts in the frame of Soviet nationalities policy, as well as the peculiarities of the center-periphery urban identity boundaries from the Soviet urban planning perspectives. The study will observe the toponyms in the frame of policy of Korenization or nativization or indigenization in a broader sense, or let us say from the perspective of the policy applied in the affirmative action empire, as Terry Martin mentioned. Through the analysis of the official discourse, the paper will present the paradigm shift in Soviet nation building narratives of communist power in Soviet Armenia during the period of 1921 till 1939. This study is in its very initial stage. As such, it raises more questions than answers, such how was the Soviet urban planning policy intertwined with the Soviet primordialism approach on the constructing the Soviet nation? Or may this process of urban development in Soviet Yerevan be the reflection of, as Terry Martin defines, the use of strategic primordialism of Soviet authorities on constructing the nation? How did the urban development project of Soviet periphery became the example of foreign and domestic policy interplay in the Soviet state? And which actors were involved in the urban planning, and what kind of political interlinks are visible through this? The study is based on the comparative analysis of archival documents for streets, district naming, renaming cases in Armenia from the National Archive, along with various maps, district plans of Yerevan, and other documentary sources of this period. So the first mention of Yerevan streets and districts in the literature dates back to the 16th, 17th centuries. During Persian rule, functional importance within the city was given to the districts. So the uniqueness of medieval Yerevan urban toponyms lies in the fact that naming preference was given to the districts, while the construction and naming of regular streets was of no importance. Another characteristic of this period was that the districts were mainly assigned names of important places or social or domestic life, and there was almost no district with anthroponymic name, that is, carrying the names of famous people. The anthroponization of urban toponyms in Yerevan will appear much later during the era of Tsarist Russia rule, and the first official names of Yerevan streets became known in that period. In 1858, the Russian official Nazarev drew the plan of Yerevan, including the official names of 30 streets. Among the names preserved from the Persian era, like Cholmakchi, Shariati, Moskiti, etc., there were appearing streets carrying the names of famous people from Russian timeline, like Astafyevskaya, Tarkhanovskaya, etc. A more detailed plan you can see on your screen. A more detailed plan of Yerevan was drawn in 1911 by architect Boris Mehrabian, who completed the naming process of Yerevan streets and districts, which had started in the previous century. Later, Alexander Tamanyan used this while designing the plan of Yerevan in 1924. So, at the beginning of the 20th century, within the Russian Empire, Yerevan appeared as an administrative center with more or less constructed streets and districts. So when the Bolsheviks took power in Armenia, they launched a wholesale street renaming process. In the first year following the declaration of Armenian SSR, over 50 names of streets, parks, squares in Yerevan were renamed. The official documents preserved in National Archive of Armenia assert that the decision regarding the first renaming of Soviet Yerevan street was made in 1921 by the Council of People's Commissars of the Armenian SSR. And the first changes were immediately publicized in Armenian Communist Party newspaper, Khorortayin Hayastan, Soviet Armenia, in September 1921. So the renaming cases for this period from 1921 till 32 aimed to eliminate the symbols of Tsarist Russia, and by rejecting the symbols of the old regime, toponymy needed to construct a new model of urban toponyms. So as a result, in the early 20s, by destroying the pre-revolutionary names associated in any way with the former regime, a wide range of symbols, characters were incorporated into the urban area, aiming to erase the history of the, in quotation marks, bad past, and to strengthen the ideology of the good present of the communist power. One of the specific features of the renaming process was the curtailing the Armenian historical past, underlying the idea that the entire history and culture of the nations and regions began with the Bolshevik Revolution. Basically, in this period, the bulk of central Yerevan with the Soviet names was created. So, by the middle 20s, the central government not only subjugated the renaming process, but also became interested in toponymy as a new genre of propagandist practice. Starting from 1933, political transformation of the party, reaching its climax with Stalin's repressions, were instantly reflected in Yerevan toponyms. The harder were the repressions of the protagonists of socialism in the USSR toward the nation, the more actively people glorified them publicly. And the implementation of the planned lifetime denomination as a widespread practice during the years of Stalin's repression demonstrated the legitimacy of the Soviet concept of socio-ideological toponymization of the geographic and social landscape. Meanwhile, against the background of the process of legitimization of Bolshevik power in Soviet Yerevan, including also through the reconstruction of urban toponymy in Soviet Yerevan, the use of the resettlement of Armenian genocide survivors was still remaining unresolved. On the one hand, the Lausanne Treaty signed in July 1923 made it clear that the displaced Armenians would not be able to return to their homes. And on the other hand, the idea of creating an Armenian national home in the decisions of League of Nations was moving forward with difficulties. In spite of different attitudes of Armenian national delegations, Soviet People's Commissars of Foreign Affairs, Georgy Chicherin, and the rather strict position of Lenin toward the idea of location of Armenian national home, it was, however, decided to relocate the Western Armenians on the territory of the USSR. At first, it was planned to exclude the possibility of gathering Western Armenians in one place, and the extraterritorial resettlement was encouraged. But later, taking into account the role of compatriotic unions, that is, the Armenian diaspora groups from various towns or regions in the former Ottoman Empire, in this process and other factors, the Soviet side took a positive stand on the issue of the resettlement of Armenians in the territory of Soviet Armenia. So here bringing the Armenians to the internal frontiers of the Soviet Armenian Republic matched the logic of Soviet Union's territorialized vision of nationality, as Laycock mentioned. The Armenian refugee resettlement project matches with other elements of Soviet nationalities policy in 1920s, that is the policy of colonization, together with the strategy of combining national groups within the clearly defined territories. The resettlement process required large-scale financial investments, which were made possible due to the efforts of liberal diaspora organizations like Armenian General Benevolent Union, the Armenian Compatriotic Unions, the HOC, that is Committee for Armenian Relief. So here, HOC also performed an intermediary function between the diaspora organizations and the Soviet government. These connections were the cornerstone of Soviet Armenian reconstruction until the period of Stalin's repressions, when all of them were banned and some members of which were repressed. So the decision was taken to build new settlements for Armenian refugees near the city of Yerevan, assigning them the names of lost cities in Turkish Armenia. Some authors explain this political action of the center from the standpoints of the benefit of the Soviet socioeconomic situation. Others stress the purpose of generating financial support from diaspora communities. But the fact is that this process is carried out under the direct political directive of Moscow. And however, these new settlements were found close to Yerevan, which later were to be linked and become districts of Yerevan. New settlements were built mainly in the area close to Yerevan, including all borders of the city. The compatriotic unions strongly emphasized the geographical location of those settlements, stressing out the visibility of Ararat Mountain as a symbol of the occupied homeland. The issue of the location of each settlement was discussed and agreed upon in detail with the representatives of compatriotic unions. So following this principle, Noraresh, Norarabkir, and Nubarashen were founded, and the plans of those settlements were developed and designed by Alexander Tamanyan. In the middle of 20s, Nor Malatia, Sebastia, Kesaria, Nor Tomarza, Nor Tigranakert, and other settlements were founded close to Yerevan, uniting Armenians from those settlements carrying the same names of the cities, villages left in Turkey, intentionally reminding of the lost towns of historic homeland. So, interestingly, these settlements bearing the names of the hometowns or provinces left in Turkey were often relocated to the urban landscape of Soviet Armenia, along with the names of their constituent small villages and provinces. In this case, the names of the latter were given to a building or a group of buildings in one or another settlement, which later turned into districts, as if recreating or preserving in this way a micro-image of the indestructible integrity of native settlements. In North Sebastia, for example, you can see on the screen, there were built Nor Kamis, Nor Partisak, Nor Koçhisar. These are the townships constituted the Sebastia province, nowadays Sivas, in central Turkey. Or, for example, the compatriotic union of Hacht village applied to the Hok to build and name a house after Hacht, the village of their origin in North Sebastia. So initially, the newly built townships were inhabited by the Armenians from those settlements, kind of creating a unique communal islands, a kind of ghettos, preserving the idea of a very local homeland. This can be conditioned by the fact that each patriotic union was already a structure uniting a population of a particular settlement, a city, province, or a village remained in Turkey. A vivid practical example of the Soviet authorities' attitude toward the construction and naming of these settlements is summarized in one fragment from the opening ceremony of the foundation of Nor Arabkij. It was the first settlement built on the border of Yerevan. It was founded as a result of an agreement signed between Yerevan City Executive Committee and the Arabkij Compatriotic Union of America. The official ceremony of the foundation took place on November 29, 1925, exactly on the day of the 5th anniversary of Sovietization in Armenia. The foundation ceremony was attended by high-rank officials of Transcaucasian and local Armenian nomenclature, who, together with the representatives of the compatriotic unions, laid a foundation stone of the first building of Nor Arabkij through the melody of Antim Internationale, and it was proclaimed that the Armenians of Arabkij from all over the world had to be resettled here to get involved in the construction of Soviet Armenia. So this ceremonial act seems to sum up the idea that the settlements bearing these names, regardless of everything, are now in the Soviet territory, within the Soviet borders, and having this Sovietness does also contain a unique triumph over the opposing powers. It is noteworthy that in different Soviet years, the renaming of urban toponyms, which generally took place under the ardent slogans, never spread to these Western Armenian settlements. They remained unchanged throughout the entire Soviet period. However, in late 30s, they were merged into regions, rayons, and somehow were disguised under the names of those rayons as if reflecting the Soviet ideology of national in form and socialist in content, but vice versa, thus constructing only a socialist form. For instance, in September 14, in 1939, with the approval from Moscow and by the decree of presidency of the Supreme Soviet of Armenian SSR, Nor Sebastia, Nor Malatia, and other newly constructed settlements for Western Armenians of the same neighborhood were merged into a name named as rural rayons. And then in 1940, it was renamed after Lavrenti Beria, and right after Stalin's death in 1953, by the decree of the presidency of the Supreme Soviet in USSR, it was renamed after Stepan Shahomian, a famous Armenian Bolshevik revolutionary. In 1933, Yerevan, though, had been already divided into 3 districts. You can see on the screen districts or rayons, and named after Kirov, Stalin, Spandarian. And I should say that during the years of Stalin's repressions, the only Nubarashen district after Poros Nubar, the founder AGBU, was renamed to Soviet Armenia for several years. But a few months after Stalin's death, it got its name back. So the resettled, or in quotation marks, displaced toponyms of Western Armenia in Soviet Armenian urban landscape could be seen as a political message of early Soviet power within a domestic and foreign policy orientation. Naming of settlements for Western Armenians could be seen as a part of the program of the Soviet national policy, in particular as part of the state program of Korenization in the early 20s, which later in 1930s turned into the idea of nationalist in form, socialist in content, which, however, was implemented on the opposite. The preservation of the names of displaced toponyms in Soviet Yerevan can also be considered as center periphery opposition specificity in Soviet city, when the politically well-shaped center is opposed to the periphery or suburb, where the deviations, which are not allowed for the center, with some reservations, could appear there. So developing this research further on the example of this urban construction case, it is planned to highlight the factors influencing the paradigm shift in Soviet nation building narratives of communist power in Soviet Armenia during the period of 1921 till 1953. Thank you very much.